Hello everyone and welcome back to the Cyclocross Social podcast. Race 10 of 10 of the Christmas and New Year's period, the World Cup in Zonhoven. A nice ending to a busy period, and with me here to discuss the racing is Issam.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here once again. I was in the Kuil, I watched the racing live and the atmosphere was electric. It was a nice race to watch, had good overview, but I'll leave the summary to you because you had a better view of that on the TV.
Indeed, as most people, they were watching it on TV in the broadcast, and we saw Van der Poel and Van Aert, the duo probably that everybody was hoping for. Pidcock was not in the race, but it was actually Sweeck, the leader of the World Cup, that took the first dive in the Kuil. In the off-camber, however, the second passage in the Kuil, it was Van der Poel leading Van Aert in the first lap. But then there was already the first mistake from Mathieu van der Poel on the off-camber. The tumble that didn't really cost him that much time, and he was able to get back on his bike and get back in the wheel of Wout van Aert, who at the moment was then leading. So then we maybe go to a duo between Van Aert and Van der Poel, because vanthourenhout and Sweeck at that moment are not able to really get in the connection. Van Aert puts Van der Poel in the second lap under pressure, especially on the off-camber, where it went so wrong the first time for Van der Poel, and Van Aert gets a gap. Van der Poel then has to chase again, but actually manages to do quite well. Then in the third lap, Van der Poel actually takes over from Van Aert in the off-camber, and then he's able to put Van Aert under pressure. Van Aert has to chase a little, but is not really faced by Van der Poel's good passage through the off-camber. Then the moment just before the third lap where Van der Poel crashes on a very odd place, a place where you normally do not see a lot of crashes. Van Aert is very thankful the dive of Van der Poel gets a gap and kind of builds on it. It's 5 seconds, 10 seconds, comes 15 seconds, then goes to 30 seconds, and then we know that we are going to a scenario where Van Aert is in the lead and he's not going to give that lead away. Small moments from Van Aert where he struggled a little bit through the sand, but overall it was almost dominating fashion from Van Aert, who eventually will win the race in Zonhoven. But then behind, Van der Poel got company from vanthourenhout and Sweeck, was sitting behind, recovering maybe a little bit from the back issues that he said after the race. Then in lap 6 was able, with a phenomenal way through the passage through the off-camber in the Kuil, was able to get away from vanthourenhout and Sweeck to secure his second place. And then it was the battle for third between vanthourenhout and Sweeck. Sweeck just a little bit better, maybe had that advantage of the freshness and is in a very good form. Vanthourenhout obviously had to race in Gullegem and was able in the last lap to get away from vanthourenhout to secure his third spot on the podium.
Yeah, not the battle that we had hoped for, but we can only applaud Wout van Aert. I mean, his campaign this busy racing period was fantastic. He did 9 out of the 10 races and he won 7 out of them. Before he had also won Dublin. He only lost Gavere and Herentals. I mean, that's quite a list of results to put forward, and today it was also just all so smooth, all so good, and I just think that he was simply the best through the sand. And we'll come to the women's race in a bit, but there you had Van Anrooij, who maybe was not the fastest through the sand, but definitely the most consistent. And I think the same goes for Van Aert. He was the most consistent without crashing. He didn't make any mistakes. The only times he got in trouble was because he got a bike of Van der Poel in his face, and the other time in the first lap he needed to hop over Van der Poel's bike. That consistency really helped him, and then in combination with just his pure power really gave him the upper hand today, although we could see some signs of tiredness coming through. I mean, he waited a bit before he really went for it. He knew that it cost a lot of energy, the races in the past days, and that pure explosiveness that we saw in the earlier phase of this period when we were racing in Diegem, Loenhout, Zolder, Gavere. You can't keep that up day in, day out. That will wear you down. So today a bit of a different approach, but it worked fine for him and he was simply the best today, deserved that win, especially with Van der Poel not delivering today.
Van Aert today didn't really want to go that early in the race, or at least didn't want to go really solo from the start, because he already had a gap and had the possibility to do so, to put them under pressure. But he chose to let Van der Poel get back. But today Van Aert was really good. I think that you could definitely see that technically he lacks a little bit, but he can compensate that amazingly with the power that he has, and he's able to to minimize the risk of mistakes and the mistakes themselves. So if there was any doubt about who was the better out of the two, and the doubts that we had in some of the previous races, I think that the doubts were today removed by Van Aert very convincingly, and also in Kokzijde. But today as well, it was the Van Aert show. The fans were cheering on, and it was truly a spectacle to watch how he was going through the race.
Pure cyclocross today. The speed that he was carrying through the kuil was insane. I don't think you get the proper perception of that on the TV, but I managed to get on the front row and the first downhill they took in the kuil, and the wind these riders generate with the speed they go down, it's insane. And I can only recommend everybody to go to Zonhoven. It's one of the best races to watch. In the kuil, you have a good overview, you see them multiple times, can follow the rest on the LED screen. Even if you don't understand the speaker, you will be able to follow the race, and you can get to see a miracle like Van Aert working. I mean, as you said, he might not have been the fastest in the downhills, but the consistency and the power that he had made him able to not make mistakes, compensate for a lack of technique, compensate for maybe a lack of risk, but he is still very good technically, because the way he took the second downhill, which was the off-camber one in a couple of the laps, was something else. He was flying there. So normally riders need to pay to get lessons in cyclocross from a class like Wout van Aert, but Wout van Aert gave away these lessons for free today to all of his competitors, because it was just something else today. He was on a whole different level in terms of mindset. Yes, okay, he was a bit tired. As you say, he didn't want to open the race too early, but it was still so good despite the tiredness. Just bravo to him. But the contrast couldn't be bigger with Mathieu van der Poel, because he was horrendous today. I mean, some very fast passages through the sand, but overall just terrible. A lot of mistakes. It was one of the worst, if not the worst, technical performance I've seen from Van der Poel in a long time, maybe even in his career. Those mistakes is not something we are used to Van der Poel doing. We know that he's good in the sand in Kokzijde, but today it was just terrible, making a lot of mistakes. He said himself it was due to a lack of focus, which was caused by the back injuries, which we reported on in our Kokzijde podcast. The story was that he was all good to go again before today, but today the story quickly changed that he still had quite some pain and that he couldn't go all out for longer than half of a lap, and that seems worrying. And therefore I have two questions for you, Issam, because we need to discuss them. Do you think it was wise to start if he knew that he had back issues after Kokzijde, which according to him were caused by tiredness of a busy racing period? And two, should we start getting worried for a similar scenario to what we had last year, where he was forced to miss cross season and had a very awkward preparation for his spring campaign?
For Van der Poel, it's definitely not ideal. What I'm really, what bothers me a little bit is how much was that pain in Kokzijde, because in the pre-race interview he was talking about that when he was not really pushing in the pre-ride, it felt okay, but he felt a little bit, but he was like, when I'm not pushing, I don't feel it. But that's normal. As a human in a body, it can be that some pains when you're not really pushing, it doesn't really play up. And I do not understand that before a race you actually already kind of know that it might be playing up if you are on 100% effort, and then just you keep on going. It's a very I would say problematic situation at the moment, because he's riding with pain in his back, but how bad is it? That's always a very difficult question, because we cannot really judge that. But it's bad enough at the moment, visually, in terms of performance. He's not performing at the level that Van der Poel could be performing at. Doesn't mean that I think that he could have won from Van Aert today. That is difficult. But I definitely think that he at least would have given a duel. And, to go on your second question, if, we should be worried about him, I think that if we are in a sort of situation where he was in last year, or close to, and he goes on training camp and he actually still feels that the back is not 100% recovered from the supposed busy period that he went through, then it's going to be a very difficult situation, because are you going to take the risks? What is going to be more important? What is going to have priority? Is the road campaign going to have priority over Hogerheide, the World Championships cyclocross? Those decisions have to be made, and I think that time will tell how much the back will recover on his training camp. He's going to start probably in Benidorm, so at Benidorm we might get a kind of an update, and probably I would expect that if they're going to make a decision on his campaign in cyclocross and the World Championships and how he's going to get forward from, is probably with Benidorm and the way he rides Benidorm. If he also encounters back issues in Benidorm, I think it's game over for the Worlds, and then he's probably going to try and figure something out to make sure that on the road he at least can be there at a full 100%.
It's important that they figure out what this is, because if it's tiredness, which they thought it was after Kokside, I think it's a pretty stupid idea to start here in Zonhoven. I mean, why take the risk? You have pain with some tiredness. Why does Zonhoven matter in this season? They are racing, with they I mean Van der Poel and Alpecin, for one race this season, and that one race is the World Championships. Even if they lose all races before, that world title makes or breaks their season. So skipping Zonhoven, okay, you miss some points, potentially miss out on a first row start at the Worlds, but it shouldn't be too much of an issue. If it's more chronicle and it's the same injury, I think it would be a very different question. I mean, he himself, Van der Poel, insists that it's not the same. He doesn't have the pain off the bike or when he rides on the road, but still, I think they should be careful with him, because they know he has back issues. They know his back is relatively weak. Why rush him into such a packed Christmas schedule? We need to put our question marks with that, because remember back to when he came into the road season last year, they overloaded him. They sent him to the Giro and the Tour, and that didn't work out. His back couldn't take that. And I'm just maybe a bit scared that they now have done the same with such a very busy cross period in the Christmas period. And cross is even more demanding for your back than a road race. All these 180-degree corners, everything comes from their back. So I'm just afraid that they rushed him into another too busy period of racing, and that is causing a similar effect to what we saw after the Giro Tour double. Only time can tell. We will need to wait and see and hope that things improve for him, because as you say, if it doesn't improve on the training camp and he's still in pain in Benidorm and can't focus, there's not much point in doing Worlds, because today was just terrible. We saw him make so many mistakes in the sand, the crash in the first lap, the crash later on when the bike came up in the air. That was the weirdest one I've seen, and that's not normal for a rider like Van der Poel, who usually makes almost no errors. However, there's clearly still was something in the tank, like we saw in Kokside when he accelerated when Sweeck came close. Today we saw a similar scenario when, with I think 2 or 3 laps to go, he had the best passage through the Kuil, and then, I mean, on the new off-camber side, he flew past there. He was the fastest anybody had done that day, and he didn't push all lap, but still his lap time was only 5 seconds slower than the fastest lap time Van Aert put in all day. So clearly there was still something left in the tank for him.
Yeah, that was quite visible. It was extreme way of how he went through it. There was no correction. It was just, he was almost perfect the way he went through it. It was he took a lot of speed. And that was also for him decisive to get rid of Sweeck and Van Toerenhout. But those things then make you wonder if how bad the back injury is. Is it really something that he that he continues to have issues with throughout the race, or is it something that when he kind of relaxes he doesn't really feel it and only plays up when he's pushing a little bit more, which seems to be the case if you look at the race? It might be a combination of both. At the moment it doesn't seem like it's the same as it was when he had to stop, quit the program and the season, and had to take some rest and then build up for with a small base for the road season. I think that in that situation it's not that bad as that situation, but yeah, if you're in a situation where you have a chronic back issues and it is something that you have to live with, it's definitely not smart to be loading your program. And yeah, we really just have to wait and see how it will play out for Van der Poel. And I hope that he at least can get himself 100% back and be ready for the World Championships, because unfortunately if he's not going to be there at 100%, it's I wouldn't say that there is no point watching at the men's category, but you can already kind of write down who is going to be the winner of that championship.
Surely you mean Elisabeth then, right?
yeah, Van Toerenhout, you never know, but no, I mean it is with Van Aert at the moment, the form that he is in, you need a 100% Van der Poel, and then you're going to have a close battle. And that's what we want to see. That's what every neutral viewer wants to watch. And I think even a Van Aert fan would love to see a battle between Van Aert and a very strong Van der Poel.
Without joking, I do think you're right. If Van der Poel is not going to be at a good form level in the World Championships in Hogerheide, it should normally be Van Aert. I mean, we know that based on the season so far, Van der Poel and Pidcock were the only ones coming close, and Pidcock is not doing Worlds. Van der Poel most likely is, but it will need to improve, because even for Van Aert there's still a bit of progression. From what I saw today, there were still plenty of corners where things were far from perfect, like he was missing apexes, the sharpness wasn't there. I think that today we did not see the best Van Aert, which, as I said, makes sense after the crazy schedule he did, the crazy racing he did. Both riders will go to Spain, both riders will reload. Van der Poel says that he doesn't let his confidence take a hit from this. He says he won't sleep bad because of it. He will bounce back, he will forget about this. I need to see that. I just can't help but get the impression that for Van der Poel things have been going far from expectation, and he had hoped for much more than winning 3 races and then only one in this entire Christmas block, with even a 3rd place in Diegem, which usually was his playground, his race. You can't take hit after hit and then not at some point feel anything from it. I need to see how Van der Poel recovers from this, but as said, he can make his own season a complete success if he wins there in Hogerheide. That's eventually where it's all about. They don't care about the classifications, they care about the prestige and then the world title. So we will see. There was another battle today, not for any world title, well, for some prestige, but there was still something on the line between Laurens Sweeck and Michael van Toerenhout. World Cup is leaning towards Van Sweeck, but Van Toerenhout gave it his best shot today. Sweeck eventually ended 3rd, kind of what I expected. The course was good for Sweeck and he really used the sand to his advantage, because really there was a lot of sand today, and not only the Kuil, just in general, a lot of sand.
Yeah, they were joking about it on the Belgian broadcast that it's probably not really a place where there's as much sand on the parcours as it is in Zonhoven. Even in Kokzijde, there are the dunes, obviously. But in Zonhoven, there are literally parts of the race where there is not really a lot of sand, but you can still see the sand, and there are some tracks left and right where you can get through. So, yeah, it's a unique course. And in terms of the battle between Sweeck and Van Toerenhout, I think, like you said, Sweeck had the course that suits him a little bit better. He had definitely some parts of the track where he could really utilize that advantage that he has in the sand. And I think that also the freshness, the way that he went through this Christmas New Year period was also great compared to Vanthourenhout, who made also some decisions, but still had to start Super Prestige in Gulligem. And I think adding all these things up, I think Sweeck had the advantage over Vanthourenhout. And yeah, I mean, Vanthourenhout did everything he could to bring a fight to Sweeck, and it was until the last lap, but then Sweeck, really had the upper hand, and then it was quite quickly the decisive move from Sweeck. And Vanthourenhout, we couldn't really hold the wheel of Sweeck at that moment, and then it was quite clear who was going to get that third place.
I thought it was pretty interesting that Sweeck was able to ride the hill after the first downhill of the Kuil, whilst Van der Poel and Van Aert didn't make it to the top a single time. Van Aert came close in the penultimate lap, but didn't make it. So I was pretty surprised by that, but that hill was also a lot of loose sand. I actually walked it up after the race, and running that is no fun either. But it just shows how good Sweeck is in the sand and finding the balance between the lines. So good for him. Still think Vanthourenhout put in a solid effort, but it wasn't to be for him today. If we look at the entire top 10 then, I think there's not many surprises. Van Aert with the win ahead of Van der Poel and Sweeck. Vanthourenhout ended in 4th ahead of Quinten Hermans. Strong ending to his cross season. He will be focusing on the road now. Kind of a shame, but I think we can understand it regarding the fact that he is not going to Podium Worlds anyway, so what's the point of racing for a 5th or 7th place for a rider like him, 2nd of Liège-Bastogne-Liège. Much better to focus on that. 6th place for Lars van der Haar, who continues to struggle a little bit this Christmas block. 7th place for Niels van der Putten ahead of Jens Adams, Kevin Koen and Corné van Kessel. I think we've really discussed all names this Christmas period. We've told their stories, we've told their trends. So without further ado, let's dive into the women's race. And the women's race started with quite a spectacular dive into the Kuil, to say the least. Fem van Empel, who led the pack, went straight over her bars. Spectacular crash. It looked pretty bad, but luckily for her, she was able to continue the race. That meant that she was a couple of positions down towards the back end of the top 10, and that really gave the two other favorites, Pieterse and Shirin van Anrooij, a head start on the rest. They broke away from the rest, and for the first 2 laps they led together. Van Empel in the background tried to move forward, but crashed in doing so, and that led to her being scared for the rest of the race. Pieterse and Van Anrooij looked pretty evenly matched, but then in the second downhill of the Kuil in the second lap, which is the new off-camera one, Pieterse made a mistake and crashed. That led to Van Anrooij opening a gap, and that was really the sign for Van Anrooij to up the pace. She did not allow Pieterse to come back, she kept increasing her lead over the rest, and she eventually won with some 40 seconds over Pieterse. Fem van Empel, despite taking it very cautiously in the downhills, managed to end 3rd. So, without further ado, let's get into the women's race, where Issam will tell you exactly what went down. Van Anrooij with the win. I think that was hardly a surprise on this course. We've known Van Anrooij, especially over this Christmas period, to be a rider who is great through the sand, and as we just said, this course had so much sand that Van Anrooij was almost in her natural environment, and it really did wonders for her in combination with the running. We are doing some research on her running times, and what we have found so far is pretty impressive what she's been doing, and did in the past more, and today the riding through the sand, it was good. She was not the fastest or the most spectacular through the downhill, but it definitely did the trick. She was much faster than Van Empel, maybe slower than Pieterse, but she compensated for that by not making mistakes, going well on the power sections, and with the risk of repeating myself, that training camp with the Trek Road team really did a lot of work for her, and it did wonders. She came and conquered in this Christmas period, only lost in Diegem, so yeah, a successful block of racing for her.
Yeah, definitely. I think that Van Anrooij today got a course where she could, really utilize that what she's best at, and when you give her a gap, she will fight for every meter, and I think that for Anrooij, the best scenario in terms of her race must be that she can put someone on the pressure, and she will keep on giving, she will keep going. And yeah, when the gap was there, Pieterse kind of tried to get back, and Pieterse is technically maybe a little bit better, but then it's just you cannot really gain that much, and Van Anrooij is able to compensate it with the power that she has, and the running as well is also something that she can do very well. So it is, it was for Van Anrooij, it was today a course that suits her great, and she was able, with the form that she has today, able to take the victory in a way that was quite convincing.
Yeah, and I don't think that the others today, Pieterse, Van Empel, it was the first time we saw the women's big three in action since Antwerp, which was more than a month ago. So yeah, I don't think that they really can blame themselves all too much. Van Anrooij, once she had a gap, was in control. Of course, tiredness is also affecting her, but she is going to be taking some rest. She is not racing the nationals next week. The story was super weird. It was that she needed to make a choice for Worlds, and she didn't want to do that yet, so she had to postpone, and now nationals, and she still doesn't know. So it's weird. Like, as far as I'm aware, if you race nationals in a certain category, you can still change towards the World Championships. Eva Holmgren raced the Elite National Championships this year, and she is racing the Junior Worlds. Iserbyt has done it in the past. We'll see a couple of Belgian under-23s be forced to race in the Elite category due to them having a pro contract next week. So I think the real reason is probably that training is better, and that she in fact has not made a decision about Worlds yet. We do know that Pieterse is going to be racing in the Elite category at Worlds. I do hope Van Anrooij follows her. I mean, what is there to gain for her? Not that much. So she should race Elites, especially after this win today. If we look at the riders behind her, Pieterse and Van Empel, I think both couldn't really blame themselves for too much today. Of course, they made mistakes, but especially Pieterse, it was basically one crash, and for the rest, we know that she isn't the best in the sand, whilst Van Anrooij is. We know that Van Anrooij is a better runner. We're working a bit on a case study to see what her running times were, gathering more and more data. We'll come with that a bit later towards the World Championships, but it's no shame that Pieterse couldn't keep up today. She did a good job. And then about Van Empel, yeah, I think she could have ended second, but she made too many mistakes, and that led to her being scared. And if you're afraid, the curl will eat you alive. Van Empel's crash in the first lap was because she was too eager. She went too fast, lost control of the bike. The second one was more silly. She was also too eager, this time too eager and aggressive to try and come back, and therefore missed the rut and went down. It's a shame. After that, okay, sure, she managed to come back. Her form is good, because with the way she was descending, yeah, you can do whatever you want in terms of form, but you are never going to come close to Pieterse or Van Anrooij if you go down like a grandma. That won't work.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's not really your day, and I think the first lap was just not really her day, and I think that if she didn't really crash with the first passes through the cal, then she probably wouldn't have crashed also in the off-camber, because like you said, she was not really committed in that off-camber, and it's, sometimes you can see a rider crashing before they crash. It's kind of they're already leaning to one point, and you already know that this is not really going to end well, and that was kind of how she approached that second off-camber. So yeah, I think for Van Empel, it was at that point when you have those two moments in the first lap already, you kind of have to be calm, and for her it was not really the most terrible day, because she still has that lead in the World Cup, and for her it was just a point of finishing and getting some points. And I think with a third place, you still have quite some points that will at least secure the gap that you kind of have already on Pieterse. And then you just have to make sure that in the next coming races you're not going to make those silly mistakes, because now it was just a third place at the moment, but for it could be way worse. I don't wish it to her, but you really need to make sure that going through a course that you have to focus at all times, and especially the second one was quite silly. So yeah, it's actually during this season so far we have seen Van Empel make some of these mistakes, and it's a bit hard to judge where it comes from, but it is something that she does sometimes in the races. So that's probably, if you want to have a critical point, then maybe you could point that out. But I think for her it was still in the end an okay race, and she has to focus on the nationals that are coming up and the battle that she's going to have with Pieterse.
Yeah, and it's not really a surprise to me that Van Empel made a couple mistakes too much today, or at least a couple of bad ones, because Van Empel, she is just still a bit too wild sometimes. I haven't really seen her ride a race without mistakes, and then on courses like Zonhoven that are ruthless, they will punish you for every mistake you make. You will have a couple of consequences for the mistakes you make, and luckily for her they were not too severe. So there's still some work to be done on Van Empel, and that's fine, because she's still young. Don't forget that. There's still plenty of time for those things to be polished, so you can't win every race. And if I remember back to the entire season, I think this is actually the first time she finishes a race in a position that isn't first or second. Of course, she had that DNF in Val di Sole, but for the rest, she won all the races or ended second. So, a pretty shocking stat that this is her lowest result of the season. What? She's done more than 10 races? So, yeah, still really good race by her. I think we should now take a look at the entire top 10, and we see that after just 3 Dutch riders in the top 10 yesterday, they took revenge today with the first 7 places going to the Netherlands. Van Anrooij with the win ahead of Pieterse, Van Empel, Brandt, Alvarado, Van der Heijden and Worst. Then we saw Vash in 8th, a couple of more running issues today, nothing changed there. Burkier with a decent race in 9th, and Sand Specialist Verdonschot ends in 10th. Tough race for world champion Marianne Vos, who ended outside of the top 10 in 12th. But before that, I would like to talk very briefly, before we end this episode, about the battle for 4th, because I think we can conclude that the tiredness is really affecting the riders there. Brandt had a good start, had a rough middle part, and then managed to prick through the tiredness and come 4th in the final part of the race. Van der Heijden had the opposite. Had a very good middle part of the race and then fell backwards again. Alvarado also didn't really have an extra gear. Tiredness is really hitting the riders.
Yeah, it's kind of getting visible now. Brandt in the beginning of the race was starting quite well, and then fell through, something that Brandt normally really doesn't do. Then Van der Heijden had a very strong moment with Alvarado as well, and Alvarado was actually able to kind of maintain that. But then Brandt was also finding something, some 7th, 8th gear, and got it back going again, and was able then to secure that 4th place. But obviously it will have some sort of a toll on the riders, the period that we went through. And I think most of the riders are very happy that they at least now they have a week where they can relax a little bit. But then you already have the nationals coming up, then a World Cup coming up, then another World Cup coming up, and it's in a way they are now entering a period with a little bit more rest, but it's also very important weeks that are coming up. So mentally you cannot really let everything go and relax completely, because the focus needs to stay there, and you need to be focused for the next coming races that are coming up. And for some, especially the World Cups, are going to be more important in terms of classification than others, and the nationals are going to be important for everybody that participates in it. So yeah, it's that's the part of the year, same as the last the last part of the season, where you have these riders that normally would be performing well, but then just at the end of the season it kind the tiredness kicks in, and the motivation kind of loses. Now the motivation is still there, because there are still some races to fight for, and some significant ones as well.
Then a brief look at the youth races today in the World Cup. Thibaut Nys won the men's under 23 race ahead of Wietse Meuse and Tibor Del Grosso. The men's junior race went to Leo Bisio ahead of Jordi Corses and Guus van der Einde. And the women's race was won by Laura Molengraaf ahead of Celicia Géry and Isabelle Holmgren in third. That was definitely the day of the World Cup leaders, as all 3 riders that won the youth races are also leading the World Cup. But there were a couple of riders not racing in Belgium today, as the final race of the British National Trophy Series took place in Gravesend in the UK. Thomas Amin won the men's elite race ahead of Joseph Blackmore and Daniel Barnes. The women's elite race was won by Millie Cousins ahead of Ella McLean-Howell and Meg de Bruyne. That's it then, Issam, for the final race of this Christmas period. Thank you for being here.
It's over, finally. Now we have a little bit of rest, and then the nationals are coming up. Thank you for having me, and thank you for the listeners to bearing with us going through this busy period. And yeah, now it's time to relax a little bit and then look forward to the nationals.
Yeah, we will be back after the nationals. No preview podcast for the nationals. I will be focusing on some exams. We will be taking some rest. Uni is restarting. School is restarting. It's going to be busy, but not so busy with cross, some other priorities. So we will be back after the nationals, and then we will really kick up the podcast again towards the World Championships. Thanks for listening, everyone, and goodbye.